Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tim Man Collections. And today, I'll be reading another chapter out of the Bigfoot Terror Tales, Vol.1. And this chapter is called Revenge of the Blood Creatures. And hearing what that title says already makes it sound creepy. But anyway, let's get to it. I'm telling you, it can't miss, Danny said, shaking his tray paper. These two guys, Lewis and Friedman, have broken new ground and made a mint. Carl took the paper. The two of them were sitting at Carl's kitchen table, a bottle of cheap scotch between them. He scanned the article. It's almost 1964, Danny said. It's time for guys like us to get a break. Will you pipe down, Carl said. I'm trying to read here. What's to read? You've dreamed about making a movie for years, and this is the time to do it. Those two guys have invented a whole new field of motion pictures. They are calling it the gore movie. We don't need a great script, nudity, or even great actors, just some really good bloody effects. I don't know why people think a gore movie is fun to look at. I mean, all the effects look creepy. Or, like when you see organs come out, it's like, I can't stand it, but anyway. As the vice president of Clatsy, a small, self-contained studio specializing in television commercials just outside of Detroit, Carl had made it his business to master all aspects of the industry, from setting up shots to developing and editing to sound overdubs. Man, he got a lot to do. But anyway, during this decade-long tenure, he kept copyish notebooks of all he'd learned in hopes to someday gain the chance to shoot a full-length motion picture. A loner by chance. He had never shared this dream with anyone until he met Danny, a small-town hustler with a gift for gab and a thirst for whiskey. One night, 2 years back in the bar, I'm an idea man, Danny was fond of saying. His ideas always seemed to revolve around the next big thing, so long as no real work was involved. As much as he enjoyed Danny's dream, weaving yarns of better things to come, Carl realized quickly he would be supporting their drinking habits and recommended they get together at his house. Look, Danny said, the studio shuts down tomorrow for your 3-week vacation between Christmas and New Year's. Let's do it. Let's pack your Maragas full of equipment and film and head south to Florida. Uh-oh. Skunk ape territory. Anyway, I'll swipe a few mannequin parts from the warehouse. I'm night watching now, and we're in business. Well, Carl said, unsure, do you have a script? It's all in there, Danny said, tapping his temple. It's called Terror of the Missing Link. I met a guy who works the carnival circuit who spends his winters down in Florida. His gimmick is a damned fine costume of a half-man, half-gorilla. Danny droned on, but Carl barely heard him. He was too absorbed in the article. The movie was panned by critics as cheaply made with shoddy production values, mediocre acting, and unnecessary violence. But it was making a ton of money in the grindhouse circuit. Rumor was it cost next to nothing to produce. And you think we could do this? Carl asked. Why not? Danny said. Somebody's going to. This is a whole new world in motion pictures. We should get in on it before everyone else does. He considered it for a moment. With 3 weeks of vacation and no family to spend the holidays with, he had the time. As cold as it was in Michigan, Florida sounded good too. At the studio, they had just taken their year-end inventory, and since he controlled the inventory itself, he could hide any missing film stock until he could replace it. Can we shoot this thing and be back in 3 weeks? He asked. We could shoot it and be back in 9 days. Man, you wish you could film stuff that quick, but anyway. Danny said, I got it all worked out. He tapped his temple again. And you're sure we can make money? Did you read the article? Lewis and Friedman are making a mint, and it would get our feet into the door to make another picture. Carl poured 2 shots from the bottle and passed one to Danny. Let's do it then, he said, raising his glass in a toast. The following evening, they returned to the studio after midnight, loaded up 2 cameras, sound equipment, and enough film to shoot a 70-minute feature. If they didn't waste any into Carl's Volkswagen microbus and headed for Florida, true to his word, Danny did know a man named Ringo Giesta who owned a sideshow attraction that proclaimed to have the living missing link. Carl was not impressed. The costume might fool a country bumpkin in the backwoods. Bumpkin. That's a funny word, but anyway. Of Maine, but it didn't look too good close up. Danny insisted they kept their camera angles tight. They could pull it off. The biggest problem was Ringo wanted to be paid. Danny struck a deal that gave Ringo 10% of the movie if he would bring the costume down to the swamp for shooting. The man countered by requesting 2 females by the names of Abby and Ginny to be cast in the picture. Danny told him to pay them out of his percentage, now that he was part owner in the picture. With Danny taking the reins, Carl felt his production begin to slip through his fingers. Boy, don't you just hate it when somebody wants to, fill into the film as the man running the thing or running the show, and you're the one that started it? Feel bad for them, but anyway. When Danny had finished his high finance negotiations, Ringo and Abby and Ginny loaded a suitcase each into a microbus, and they all continued south. At least in all the hubbub, it came out that Ringo had a Florida map that showed swamp locations, something near Carl and Danny had thought of. By the time they stopped for a late lunch in the little town that, according to the map, should not have been too far away from the entrance to the swamp, everyone was hungry. Carl knew he would soon be lightening his wallet even more after ordering. Danny walked up to the bulletin board near the door. He came back holding a half slip of paper. Look at this, he said, shoving the note in front of Carl's eyes. I say we stop at the right place. Carl studied the note. In large block handwriting, it proclaimed Stanford Brothers Swamp Tours and Hunting Expeditions. There is no phone number, he said. Flipping the note over, Danny showed him the crudely sketched map on the back. Shouldn't be too hard to find, he said. It looks close by. I'll ask the waitress. No, Carl said. He had already figured out the best way to shoot anything was to keep it unannounced if possible. The minute people learned there was a movie involved, they saw dollar signs and thought they should get a piece of the action. We'll find it. He let that set in before adding, after we eat, let's shoot a few scenes of the girls around the town talking. We could dub the audio later. He had to shoot something, and the girls were the only cast he had so far. Once again, Carl found himself longing for the cold of Michigan. About an hour's drive out of town, Carl took the dirt turnoff marked with a sloppy painted sign that read Stanford Bros, complete with an arrow pointing to the right. He maneuvered the microbus down to the quarter mile of dirt road that ended at a dilapidated little house surrounded by several old cars on the blocks and a boat with a tree growing out of it. Looks like a trustworthy place, he muttered. No, if I see all that, I'd be like, did we make the right turn? Anyway, easy, Danny said. We need someone to take us out to the swamp for some pickup shots of the girls and the missing link out there. Carl sighed. And how did the girls get there? It will come to me, Danny said. A shirtless man wearing bib overalls in his 30s came out in the front door carrying a shotgun. Help you? He called out, running his fingers through his blonde hair. Oh, this looks promising, Carl said. Quiet, Danny whispered. You always say don't judge a book by its cover, but don't judge this guy by his character, basically. Unless he is mischievous, but anyway. This is why I'm the producer and you're the director. He rolled his window down and poked his head out. Looking for the Stanford brothers, he said. We're looking for a trip into the swamps. The man with the shotgun squinted, looking in the microbus. All of you? Yes, Danny replied. It's some movie equipment. I'll have to ask my brother, the man said. Looking back to the shack, he called out, Willie, come out here. He looked back into the van. Name's Phil. Willie came out, the spitting image of his brother, right down to the shirtless overall fashion statement. Yeah? These folks want to shoot a movie in the swamp, Phil said. Willie looked at the sky. Getting dark, he said. We can't go until morning. He looked into the microbus. Y'all gonna make a movie? We are, Daddy said. Danny Carl whispered. Ignoring him, Danny said, Why would you and your brother be interested in being in it? Willie looked at Phil, who nodded. Maybe, he said. What would it pay? Man, everybody's interested in payment, aren't they? What would it cost us to all go out in the morning before sunrise? Take 2 trips, Willie said. Cost you? He paused, thinking of the proper amount. $200 ought to do it. Carl stiffened. He was the one funding this operation. Danny touched his shoulder, quieting him. That your normal going rate? Danny asked. Or did you jack it up for some movie people? Willie grinned. Well, Danny smiled at the man. I thought so. What about being in the movie? Phil asked. Do you have your actors' union cards? Danny asked. What union card? Willie asked. Seeing the confusion on Willie's face, Danny continued, Oh, I guess not. Never mind. He paused as if thinking, See, in Hollywood you have to have an actor's union card to be paid for being in a feature film. Mm-hmm. But these guys ain't actors. Hello. So how do you get one of those? Phil asked. It's complicated, Danny said. Everything in Hollywood is. See, you have to be in a feature film to qualify for getting a union card. Huh, Willie said, scratching his stomach. That don't make no sense. Now, usually I would be scratching my head, but he's scratching his stomach. But anyway, it does in Hollywood. You have to intern in a movie. Everyone knows movie stars get big money, so you have to prove yourself by interning in a feature film first. So we can't be in the movie, Phil asked. We can't pay you, Danny said. You can intern. Intern, Willie said. That means work for free? Pretty much, Danny said. And I know you're not interested in that, but then we'll get them union cards that could get big money, Phil asked. Well, yes, the next time you're asked to be in a movie, you could pretty much name your own price. Carl rolled his eyes at Danny, strung the 2 brothers along. What next time? Willie said. We ain't seen no movie people before, you. Good point, Danny said. I can't vouch for the rest of Hollywood, but our studio is pretty excited about this movie. They are already talking about making a part 2. And we could be in it, Phil asked. I say so. The roles I'm considering you 2 for are the heroes in this picture. You have to be in part 2. Danny reached down on the seat and grabbed a notebook. He's been jotting notes on. Let me see if I can work some numbers. From his seat, Carl could see Danny was just drooling, but he sure looked like he was serious. You know, Danny, looking at his doodles, there might be some way we can work this out. How do you mean? Willie asked. The studio will never agree to paying you $200 to take us out to the swamp, but let's say you take us out there for $50, act as our guides for a hunting trip for another $50, and we'll toss in another $50 for something we call services rendered. I don't know where they get that money from, but I hope they have it, because them guys with guns, they don't think they can play their games. But anyway, he looked at if he was adding up his figures. So we could probably give you $150. What services rendered? Willie asked. You let us camp out here in our van tonight, feed us and appear in the movie. And we'll get our union cards, Phil asked. You certainly will. And if we get to do a part 2, you will be the first on the list. And then you can get big money. Phil and Willie conversed between themselves a moment. It was obvious where they were heading. Okay, Willie said, but I want to, in writing, that we get the first offer and the right to name our price for part 2. Done, Danny told him. No one was very happy at the prospect of spending the night in the van, but as it turned out, it wasn't as bad as they expected. Willie and Phil slow roasted a wild boar. I don't know if I could eat that, but anyway. They killed earlier, and dinner was delicious. Also, by chance, besides being swamp guys, the brothers were proficient in creating moonshine. I don't know if that's legal down in Florida, but anyway. In the woods, you could get away with anything, basically, but anyway. Carl got plenty of footage of the roasting hog with everyone sitting around the fire, and after a little while, the Stafford brothers even agreed to stage a few shots around their whiskey still. It was over the second or third round of what Carl quickly thought of as Stafford Brothers paint thinner when Willie finally asked about the movie. It's called The Missing Link, Danny said. The story is about a carnival that comes to town and one of their freaks gets loose and runs into the swamps. You two will play the hunters that have to track and kill it. Abby and Jenny will play your wives, and they accompany you on the hunt. They will be killed, or you avenge them by hunting down the beast. What you got for a missing link? Phil asked. Danny pointed towards Ringo. That there is Ringo Gessettia. That's Gessetti. I'm sorry I messed up your name, but anyway. The world-renowned entertainer to kings and queens. He has a costume of a half-man, half-ape that is remarkably realistic. Phil regarded Ringo kind of short, ain't he? Willie laughed. He is at that. If he was taller, he could be the Florida skunk ape. Danny stopped his sales pitch. Come on, again, he said. The Florida what? The Florida skunk ape, Willie said. Some folks in other parts in the country call it Bigfoot. Is it for real? Abby asked. Willie and Phil looked at each other. Sure it is, little lady, Willie said. But don't you worry none. Me and Phil seen old Skunky a couple times out in those swamps. He ain't gonna hurt you none. Oh, now they talk about the skunk ape. Okay. He sure ain't, Phil said. Willie grazed him with a bullet a few years back. Ooh! I know he's bad about that, but anyway. He keeps his distance from us now. I would have killed him if he hadn't moved at the last minute. Why a skunk ape? Carl asked. Because he stinks, Phil said, as if talking to a child. Yeah, because them skunk apes are no joke. They actually stink. But anyway, I'm going to stop this and go to part 2 because this is actually way too long.